You ever look in the mirror and feel like you're finally seeing yourself, not the version that was broken, not the one that was pretending, but the real you? That moment, that sacred pause, that breath between the chaos and the calm, that's where healing begins. Not in the noise, not in the applause, not in someone else's validation. Healing begins in the stillness, in the whispers of your soul that once trembled in silence. You see, we often think healing is about forgetting what hurt us. But healing through integration, that's a different journey. That's the kind of healing that doesn't erase the scars, but embraces them. It's when your pain doesn't scream for attention anymore. It speaks with wisdom. Some days you might feel like you're standing in the middle of your past and your future, torn. But the truth is, when you begin to integrate, you're no longer fighting your story. You're learning to carry it with grace. You're becoming whole. Not because the world is fixed, but because you've made peace. And if you've ever wondered, am I truly healing? Then listen close. Because there are signs, real powerful soul-shaking signs, that you're rising. You're not who you were, and that's your power. You know, there was a time when you did everything you could to cover your wounds. You smiled through the pain, laughed when your heart was breaking, nodded when you should have screamed. You learned to wear masks so well, even you started to believe them. But healing through integration, real healing, it doesn't ask you to cover those scars. It invites you to uncover them, because you finally understand that what hurt you isn't what defines you, but how you faced it, how you carried it. That's where your power lives. You no longer whisper about the things you went through. You stand up, you speak up, and not from a place of bitterness, but from a place of courage. You've looked your pain in the face and said, you won't shame me anymore. That's when you know you're healing. When you stop hiding, there's something sacred about reaching a point where your story becomes your strength. You stop being afraid of your own history. You stop cringing when someone mentions your past. You stop avoiding those parts of you that felt too broken to talk about. Because now you understand those moments were not your end. They were your becoming. Every wound, every heartbreak, every betrayal, it didn't destroy you, it forged you. It built a depth in you that shallow waters can't understand. You wear your scars like armor now, not because you want people to feel sorry for you, but because you want them to see what survival looks like. You've turned your pain into purpose. That's a powerful transformation, and nobody can take that from you. You used to think strength meant pretending nothing ever hurt you. You thought holding it together meant staying silent, pushing through, never letting them see you cry. But now you know, it takes far more strength to be real. To stand in front of the world and say, yes, I've been hurt. Yes, I've fallen, but I got back up. And every time I got back up, I rose with more fire, more truth, more grace. You don't flinch anymore when someone brings up the things you once tried to forget. Because you've done the work. You've gone into the dark corners of your soul and lit candles there. You've faced the parts of you that once begged to be ignored. And instead of running from them, you held them. You listened and you loved them back to life. That's healing. You don't tell your story for attention anymore. You tell it because someone out there is where you once were. Someone is drowning in the same silence that nearly took you out. And if your story can be a life raft, if your voice can remind them that they're not alone, that matters. That's what honoring your wounds looks like. It's not about reliving the past. It's about revealing the strength you found in the ashes. And even if your voice shakes, even if the memories still sting a little, you speak anyway, because hiding no longer serves you. Silence no longer protects you. Truth is your medicine now. There's a moment when you stop seeing your scars as shameful reminders and you start seeing them as proof of your growth. You no longer wish things had been different, because now you realize if life hadn't cracked you open, you wouldn't have discovered the light inside you. If you hadn't been abandoned, you wouldn't have learned how to hold yourself. If you hadn't been broken, you wouldn't have understood the power of rebuilding yourself from the ground up. Your wounds became your teachers. They showed you who was real, who wasn't. They revealed your strength, your resilience, your ability to keep loving even when love betrayed you. You don't just remember what you went through, you carry it with honor. because you survived. And surviving wasn't just about making it through. It was about learning how to breathe again, how to trust again, how to look in the mirror and not see someone damaged, but someone divine. You've stopped trying to be over it, because some things you don't get over. You learn to live with them, and that's okay. Integration means accepting that some parts of you still hurt, but they don't hold you hostage anymore. They don't run the show. You get to write the story now, not your trauma. You're no longer defined by the worst thing that happened to you. You're defined by the way you kept walking even when the path was covered in glass. That's what people can't see when they judge your shine. They weren't there during your storm. Yes. What once made you flinch now makes you stand tall. You don't shrink around your truth anymore. You walk into rooms with your head high, knowing that everything you've been through has prepared you for this moment. You're not afraid to be vulnerable because you know vulnerability is strength, not weakness. You know that every time you tell your truth, you heal a little more. And maybe, just maybe, you give someone else the courage to speak their truth too. That's the ripple effect of honoring your wounds. It doesn't just free you, it sets others free too. You've learned that pain is part of the process, not a sign you're failing. And healing doesn't mean erasing, it means embracing. You look back now and you barely recognize the person who used to flinch at every trigger, who used to question their worth because of what they endured. You're not that person anymore. You've grown. You've evolved. You've looked at the ugliest parts of your story and said, even here, I choose to love myself. That kind of self-love is unshakable. It's not surface level. It's deep, rooted, immovable. You're not seeking outside approval anymore because you found inner peace. You're not chasing people who don't see your value because you finally see it for yourself. You're not running from your past. You're rising from it. You used to think healing was some distant destination. Now you know it's a daily choice. Some days you feel strong, other days you feel broken all over again. And both are part of the journey. Integration means you hold both joy and sorrow in the same hands. It means you laugh with the same mouth that once cried for hours. It means you dance, even if your legs still tremble. You don't need perfection anymore. You just need presence. You show up for yourself now. You rest when you're tired. You speak when you're ready. You cry when you need to, without shame. Because healing isn't about being tough. It's about being true. And the most beautiful part, you're still becoming. You're not done. There's more life ahead of you, more love, more purpose, more clarity. The fact that you've made it this far, that you're still standing, still hoping, still growing, that says everything. You are not the same person who was once silenced by pain. You are the one who found a voice in the rubble. And that voice, your voice, it matters. Speak it, live it, own it. Because your healing's not a secret to hide. It's a testimony to share. There comes a time in your life when you realize that feeling something deeply doesn't mean you have to drown in it. That moment right there, that's the shift. That's when you know something in you is changing. You used to get caught up in waves of emotion. One disappointment could take your whole spirit down. One angry word could send your heart spiraling. You were a slave to your reactions, a prisoner to your pain. You felt things so hard it broke you in places you didn't even know could crack. But now you sit with it. You breathe through it. You feel it, but you don't let it destroy you. You recognize the storm and still choose not to be swept away. That, my friend, is the power of emotional mastery. Something you didn't even know you were capable of until the pain pushed you there. You see, it's not that the sadness is gone. It still visits, still taps you on the shoulder in quiet moments. The difference is now you don't run from it. You don't numb it, drown it, or throw it on someone else. You listen. You let it speak. You ask it what it came to teach you. You hold space for your grief, your anger, your anxiety, but you don't give them the steering wheel. You learned that your emotions are messengers, not enemies, and that awareness changes everything. You stopped saying, I am angry, and started saying, I feel anger. You stopped saying, I'm broken, and started saying, I'm in pain. You separated your identity from the experience. And with that space came freedom. There was a time when you couldn't trust yourself with your own emotions. You would lash out, shut down, self-sabotage. You would do anything to escape the feelings bubbling inside of you because you didn't know how to hold them. You thought feeling deeply made you weak, but what you didn't realize is that sensitivity is a gift. It just needs guidance. And now you've become the guide. You've learned how to pause before you react. You've learned how to give your heart the grace of silence before you speak from a place of pain. You've learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is sit in your discomfort and not let it poison your peace. You don't numb anymore. You don't explode. You reflect. That's emotional strength most people never reach. There are moments when the tears still come out of nowhere. Memories rise, your chest gets heavy and your breath catches, but now you let it come. You don't apologize for your emotions anymore. You don't feel guilty for needing to cry, for feeling deeply, for having soft places inside of you. What changed is the judgment. You stopped judging yourself for feeling. You stopped thinking you had to be robotic just to survive. Now you let your heart break when it needs to because you know it's not permanent. It's release. You let your joy swell when it rises without wondering how long it'll last. You let life move through you. And that flow, that surrender, that's healing. You stopped fighting your own emotional tide. You learned how to swim. You used to think the goal was to never feel pain again. You told yourself healing meant happiness all day, every day, but the truth is, real healing is about learning to live in the full spectrum of your emotions without letting them control your behavior, your decisions, or your identity. You don't push emotions away anymore. You walk beside them. You treat your feelings like sacred guests. They knock, you open the door, you offer them a seat, and when they've said what they came to say, you let them leave. You don't chain them up or pretend they're not there. You meet them with compassion. That kind of emotional fluency, it took work. It took breakdowns, therapy, journaling, prayer, and 100 sleepless nights. But it taught you that emotions aren't wild animals to be feared. They're parts of your humanity calling you home. Sometimes the people around you don't even know how much you've changed. They still expect the old version of you to show up. The one who reacted without thinking, who broke down under pressure, who screamed just to feel heard. But you're not that person anymore. Now, when someone disrespects you, you don't lose your peace trying to explain your worth. You walk away. You protect your energy. You've learned that you don't owe anyone your emotional stability. Not your past, not your pain, not your ego. You owe it to your future, to your growth, to your purpose. That's why you stay grounded now. That's why you stay calm when chaos calls your name. Because peace is your new baseline. And anything that threatens it isn't worth your time. You still get triggered sometimes. That old wound still whispers. That old voice still echoes. But now you catch it. You recognize the pattern. You ask yourself, is this mine? Or is this old pain trying to take the mic again? You don't let your past drive your present anymore. You slow down. You self-soothe. You create space between the emotion and the action. And that space, that's where your power lives. Because in that pause, you reclaim control. You choose how to respond instead of being yanked around by old trauma. That's the difference. That's how you know you're healing. Not because the emotion is gone, but because it no longer hijacks your life. Some days you still feel like falling apart, but even in those moments, you don't abandon yourself. You don't look for someone else to fix you, to distract you, to carry what's yours to feel. You've become the parent your inner child needed. You soothe yourself with kindness, not criticism. You wrap your own heart in compassion. You sit on the floor, hand on chest, and say, I'm here. I've got you. We're okay. That's love. That's healing. That's what happens when you stop making your emotions the enemy and start making them allies. You no longer treat your heart like a battlefield. You treat it like a sacred space. You don't let someone else's chaos invade your calm anymore. You've learned how to separate your emotions from theirs. You can hold space for someone's anger without absorbing it. You can witness someone's pain without taking it on, because you've learned that empathy doesn't mean self-sacrifice. It means presence, not punishment. You don't bleed for people who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. You've built emotional boundaries, not walls, but gates. You open them wisely. You protect your peace fiercely because you know your emotions are sacred and not everyone deserves access to them. There was a time when you believed that strength meant not feeling anything. You were taught to toughen up, to suppress, to push it down. But now you've redefined strength. Strength is feeling deeply and still showing up. Strength is crying and still moving forward. Strength is sitting with your rage and not letting it make you cruel. Strength is feeling the grief and not letting it paralyze you. You've learned that vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. And now that you own it, nobody can use your emotions against you. You've taken back your power. The most powerful people are not the ones who never feel, they're the ones who feel everything and still choose love. And that's who you're becoming. You don't numb, you don't run, you stand. You breathe, you let the emotion rise and fall like a wave, and you stay anchored in your truth. You no longer need to control how you feel. You've learned to coexist with it. You walk with your sadness like an old friend. You laugh with your joy like a child again. You let life move through you without fear. And that's not just healing, that's freedom. You used to be afraid of your emotions because they felt too big, too wild, too consuming. But now you see, they're not here to harm you. They're here to show you something. Every wave of emotion is a message, a mirror, a moment of reflection. When anger shows up, it's often guarding your boundaries. When sadness comes, it's often revealing your love. When fear rises, it's asking for protection. And now you listen. You honor what each feeling came to say. You don't rush to fix it or flee from it. You just sit with it. And by doing that, you become emotionally fluent in a world that runs from its feelings. You become a lighthouse, still, steady, full of light. And even now, as life keeps shifting, as pain still tries to sneak in the back door, you're not afraid. You know how to face it. You've built an inner home that emotions can pass through without tearing down the walls. You welcome the real, the raw, the true. You've stopped reaching for perfection and started reaching for presence. And when the waves come again, and they will, you won't be swept under. You'll rise like you always do. Because you're not controlled by what you feel. You've learned how to feel it all and still stand tall. There's a moment in your healing when you finally realize you don't have to apologize for protecting your peace. You don't have to explain why your heart needed distance, why your mind needed silence, or why your spirit couldn't carry someone else's weight any longer. And that realization, it hits like freedom. You used to let people overstay their welcome in your life because you were scared of being seen as selfish. You let them cross your lines, drain your energy, and take your kindness for granted because you were conditioned to believe that saying no made you a bad person. But not anymore. Not now. Now you understand that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors, doors that you control. And not everyone gets a key because you've learned the hard way. Peace is expensive. And you paid for it with your breakdowns, your sleepless nights, and the version of you that kept putting others before yourself. That's why you protect it now, not with anger, but with clarity. Not with fear, but with love. And if they don't understand that, they were never meant to walk with you in this new season. You remember when you used to feel guilty for needing space, for not replying right away, for canceling plans, for saying, I just can't right now. That guilt sat in your chest like a weight you couldn't shake off. You convinced yourself that your worth came from being available, being helpful, being selfless. But now you know better. Now you understand that you were burning yourself out, trying to keep everyone else warm. You were sacrificing your own mental health just to make sure nobody else was uncomfortable. But healing taught you something powerful. If someone truly loves you, they'll respect your boundaries. They won't guilt you into sacrificing your peace to make them feel better. They won't call you selfish for choosing yourself. That kind of love doesn't control, it honors. And once you tasted that kind of peace, you stopped entertaining anything less. You no longer shrink your needs just to fit someone else's comfort zone. You used to think that being kind meant being available all the time. You said yes when you meant no. You stayed in rooms where your soul was suffocating. You tolerated disrespect and called it patience. You gave people chance after chance, hoping they'd finally see your heart and treat it right. But now you see clearly. You've learned that kindness without boundaries turns into self-betrayal. You can love someone and still say, this is where I draw the line. You can be compassionate and still say, I won't allow this anymore. That's not cruelty, that's maturity. That's healing. That's what happens when you finally understand that your peace, your energy, your emotional safety are not up for negotiation. You're not here to be everyone's savior. You're not here to exhaust yourself trying to prove your worth. You're here to live in alignment with your truth. And your truth deserves space, protection, and priority. There's a sacred power in the word no. And it took you years to claim it. You used to fear that two-letter word like it would burn bridges, end friendships, cause people to abandon you, so you avoided it. You stretched yourself thin. You said yes to things you didn't want. You took on responsibilities that weren't yours. But every time you said yes out of guilt, you said no to yourself, no to your time, no to your healing, no to your growth. But now you say no with full chest, clear mind, and steady heart. You say it without flinching, without backtracking, without over-explaining, because you finally understand your no is sacred. It's your right. It's your responsibility. And if your boundaries push people away, let them go. The ones meant for you will never require you to burn yourself out to be loved. Healing taught you that not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone has earned the right to sit at your table, to hear your thoughts, to feel your presence. You used to give people front row seats in your life who wouldn't even clap for you. You gave them unlimited access to your time, your energy, your heart, and they treated it like it was nothing. But you're not that person anymore. Now you evaluate who gets access. You observe how people respond to your boundaries. You watch how they act when you say, that doesn't work for me. Because how someone reacts to your boundary tells you everything about how they value your existence. And when someone tries to guilt trip you, manipulate you, or punish you for protecting your peace, you don't argue, you don't convince, you just walk away. Quietly. Strongly, without regret. It's not always easy. There are days when guilt creeps in like a shadow. Days when your old self whispers, maybe you're being too harsh. Days when you miss the connection, even if it was one-sided. But you remind yourself, setting a boundary doesn't make you unkind. It makes you conscious. It means you've stopped operating on autopilot and started living intentionally. You've stopped abandoning yourself for the sake of being liked. You've stopped confusing being needed with being loved. And even though it hurts to disappoint people, you've realized it hurts more to keep disappointing yourself. That's why you stay grounded in your boundaries. Because the cost of betraying yourself is too high now. You've come too far to go back. There's a quiet confidence that comes with honoring your boundaries. You don't need to yell, argue, or defend anymore. Your peace speaks for itself. Your energy has shifted. You don't beg to be understood. You don't over-explain your decisions. You've learned to trust your intuition. You've learned to listen to your body when it tightens in someone's presence. You've learned to walk away from what no longer feels right without needing a reason everyone agrees with. That kind of alignment, it radiates. It protects you from emotional predators. It shields you from people who feed on your people-pleasing tendencies. And most of all, it keeps you rooted in your own truth. That's where your healing lives now, in the quiet, firm decision to choose yourself over and over again without guilt. People will try to make you feel guilty for changing, for no longer being available in the same way, for no longer tolerating what you used to. But that guilt doesn't belong to you. That guilt is theirs, the result of losing the version of you that enabled their comfort. You're not responsible for how people feel about your growth. You're not obligated to stay small just so others can feel big. If your boundaries make someone uncomfortable, it's because they benefited from your lack of them. And that's not your burden to carry. Your job isn't to keep the peace at the expense of your own. Your job is to walk in your truth with love, courage, and integrity. And you're doing that now, unapologetically. Sometimes setting boundaries looks like distance, like not replying, like unfollowing, like silence. And that silence, it's not petty, it's sacred. It's a declaration that your energy is no longer a revolving door for chaos. It's a statement that you are no longer available for conversations that dishonor your soul. You used to think you had to be confrontational to set boundaries, but now you know sometimes the most powerful boundary is the one you set with your absence. You don't have to fight. You don't have to argue. You can simply disengage. Let your peace be the loudest thing in the room. Let your detachment speak volumes. That's what healing looks like in real time. There will be moments when your boundaries are tested. People will push back. They'll try to guilt you into old patterns. They'll say you've changed like it's an accusation. And you'll smile, not with arrogance, but with peace. Because yes, you have changed. You've grown. You've learned the difference between connection and obligation, between support and self-sacrifice. And you are no longer willing to pay for other people's comfort with your own discomfort. That's not selfish. That's self-aware. And even though it's hard, even though the loneliness sometimes stings, you keep going. You keep choosing yourself because you know if you don't honor your own boundaries, no one else will. Now you move with a different kind of grace, a bold, quiet, unshakable grace. You're not out to hurt anyone. You're not bitter. You're just clear. Clear about who you are, clear about what you will and will not allow, clear about what you need to stay aligned. And in that clarity, you found your power. The power to say no without guilt, the power to walk away without regret, the power to protect your peace like your life depends on it, because it does. And this power, it didn't come easy. You earned it. Through every tear, every broken relationship, every painful lesson, you earned it. And now you wear it like armor. Not to fight, but to stand. Not to attack, but to protect. Not to prove, but to preserve. You no longer apologize for needing time alone, for not attending every event, for turning your phone off, for saying that doesn't feel right to me. You no longer seek permission to rest, to disconnect, to say no, because you finally understand your life is yours. Your energy is yours. Your healing is yours. And no one has the right to make you feel guilty for protecting what's sacred. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be whole, to be aligned, to be free. And that freedom, it starts with boundaries, quiet ones, firm ones, ones that speak for you when your words fall short. And now you walk in that freedom every day with peace in your heart and no guilt in your soul. There was a time you feared being alone. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. You thought solitude meant something was wrong, like you were broken or unlovable or missing some piece everyone else seemed to have. The silence used to scream at you, reminding you of everything you didn't want to face. You'd reach for noise, conversations, relationships, distractions, just to avoid yourself. But somewhere along your journey, something shifted. You stopped seeing solitude as a punishment and started seeing it as a portal, a place where healing actually begins. You realize that the quiet isn't empty, it's full of answers. When the world gets quiet, your soul gets loud. You start hearing the things you've ignored for years. Your needs, your pain, your truth. And it's not always comfortable. In fact, at first it's terrifying, but once you stop running and start listening, you realize solitude isn't the enemy, it's the invitation. You started to see that some of your most painful moments happened in crowded rooms, surrounded by people who didn't understand you, supported by people who only stayed when you were convenient. You were never truly seen, even in the middle of attention. That kind of loneliness, when you're not alone but still feel invisible, is the deepest kind of ache. And when you compare that to solitude, you begin to see the difference. Being alone doesn't mean being unloved. It means being honest. Honest about who's really there for you and who only shows up when they need something. Solitude gave you the space to grieve the loss of illusions, to stop pretending that shallow connections filled your soul. It showed you the beauty of your own company. It reminded you that your worth isn't measured by how many people you're surrounded by, but how deeply you've learned to sit with yourself without flinching. At first, it was hard to sit in silence. You weren't used to hearing your own thoughts without interruption. You weren't used to not performing, not adjusting, not editing yourself to fit someone else's expectations. Solitude forced you to meet the unfiltered version of you. You didn't always like what you saw. The insecurity, the anger, the unresolved grief. It all rose to the surface like smoke from a fire you tried to hide. But that's the power of being alone.